In a world where everyone talks, very few are heard. In rooms full of noise, power belongs to the calmest voice. Confidence is not volume. Control is not aggression. Influence is not force. The most powerful people in any room do not speak the most, they speak the best. This is not about small talk. This is not about being loud. This is about mastering conversation so completely that when you speak, people lean in. Welcome to Audiobook Mantra. Introduction. Most people think confidence in conversation is something you are born with. They look at charismatic speakers and assume, he's naturally confident, she's just gifted. That's false. Confidence is trained, control is practiced, presence is engineered, and conversation is a battlefield most people don't even realize they're fighting on. Every interaction is a silent negotiation. Who holds the frame? Who controls the emotional temperature? Who leads the direction? Who reacts? If you react, you lose ground. If you ramble, you lose authority. If you rush, you lose control. But if you slow down, if you speak with intention, if you understand psychological timing, you shift from participant to commander. The truth is uncomfortable. Most people are not bad at speaking. They are bad at regulating themselves. Their voice shakes because their mind is racing. They talk too much because they fear silence. They over-explain because they fear judgment. They laugh nervously because they fear rejection. Conversation exposes internal instability. That is why mastering conversation is not about learning fancy vocabulary. It is about mastering your nervous system, your emotional state, your timing, your silence, your energy. When you control those, words become weapons, pauses become pressure, calm becomes dominance. In this audiobook, you will learn how to eliminate nervous energy instantly, how to slow your speech without sounding awkward, how to hold eye contact without intimidation, how to respond under pressure without collapsing, how to control group dynamics without shouting, how to make people feel your presence before you even speak, because real confidence is not loud, it is grounded. Real control is not forceful, it is deliberate. And real conversational mastery is the art of saying less, but meaning more. By the end of this, you will not chase attention. Attention will adjust to you. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. Emotional control before verbal control. Most people try to fix their words. Very few fix their state, and that is why most conversations collapse before they even begin. Before you speak, your body speaks. Before your words land, your nervous system announces you, your breathing, your posture, your micro-expressions, your pacing. All of it reveals whether you are stable or seeking approval. And people don't respond to your vocabulary first. They respond to your emotional frequency. The hidden truth about confidence. Confidence is not something others give you. It is something your nervous system signals. If your body is tense, your voice will tighten. If your breath is shallow, your speech will rush. If your mind is racing, your words will scatter. This is why some people say simple sentences and sound powerful, while others say intelligent things and sound unsure, because conversation is not intellectual first. It is physiological first. If you cannot regulate your state, you cannot regulate your delivery. Why you feel nervous in conversations. Let's go deeper. When you feel anxious while speaking, your brain is not thinking, I hope I express this clearly. It is thinking, am I being judged? Do I sound stupid? Will they reject me? Your survival system activates. Heart rate increases, breathing shortens, muscles tighten, voice pitch rises. Your body prepares for threat. But here is the truth. Conversation is not a threat. Your interpretation is. The moment you view conversation as evaluation, you lose control. The moment you view conversation as exchange, you regain control. Control the body, control the voice. If you want confidence in conversation, start here. 1. Slow your breathing before speaking. Inhale through the nose for 4 seconds. Exhale slowly for 6. This alone lowers internal panic. 2. Lower your shoulders consciously. Tension in the shoulders travels directly to your voice. 3. Speak after exhaling slightly, not while gasping for air. 4. Pause before answering. Even 1 second creates authority. People rush because they fear silence, but silence is not weakness. Silence is control. The person who can sit comfortably in silence owns the frame. The frame is everything. In every conversation, there is an invisible structure called the frame. The frame is the emotional tone, the pace, the psychological direction. If someone speaks quickly and nervously, and you match that energy, you are inside their frame. If someone speaks aggressively, and you become defensive, you are inside their frame. But if someone speaks emotionally, and you remain calm, they are now inside yours. Calmness forces others to regulate themselves, and humans naturally adjust to the most stable energy in the room. Stability is power. Emotional neutrality is magnetic. High emotional volatility repels. Grounded neutrality attracts. When you speak from a regulated emotional baseline, your tone deepens, your pace slows, your words become deliberate, your presence expands. People feel safe around emotional stability, and safety creates influence. You do not need to dominate. You need to stabilize. The discipline of not reacting. Most conversational mistakes are reactions. Someone interrupts. You rush. Someone disagrees. You defend immediately. Someone questions you. You over-explain. Reaction leaks insecurity. Control requires delay. When challenged, pause. When interrupted, continue calmly. When questioned, answer slowly. Control is visible in timing, and timing communicates status. Practice the 1 second rule. From today forward, before responding in any conversation, insert 1 second of silence. It will feel uncomfortable at first, but that second does 3 things. 1. It slows your nervous system. 2. It signals thoughtfulness. 3. It increases perceived confidence. High-status communicators do not rush, they choose. And choice is the foundation of control, the real beginning of mastery. If you skip emotional regulation and jump straight to communication techniques, you will always feel like you are performing. But when your internal state is steady, you don't perform confidence. You embody it. Conversation stops feeling like a test. It becomes a space you navigate intentionally. Master this first, because until you control your internal state, your words will always betray you. Chapter 2. The voice of authority, tone, pace, and verbal precision. Most people focus on what to say. Few understand how it is said determines whether it matters. Words carry meaning, but delivery carries weight. And in conversation, weight wins. The psychology of vocal authority. Your voice communicates 3 things instantly: certainty, emotional stability, social positioning. Before someone evaluates your idea, they evaluate your tone. If your tone rises at the end of statements, it sounds like a question. If your pace is rushed, it sounds like insecurity. If your volume fluctuates unpredictably, it signals emotional instability. Authority is not loudness. Authority is controlled consistency. The most respected voices are not the fastest, not the most dramatic, not the most aggressive. They are measured. Tone, the hidden signal of confidence. There is a difference between speaking and projecting. Projection does not mean shouting. It means speaking from the diaphragm, not the throat. When you speak from your throat, your voice tightens. It cracks under pressure. It sounds strained. When you speak from your diaphragm, your voice deepens naturally. It carries without force. It feels grounded. Try this. Place 1 hand on your chest and 1 on your stomach. Speak normally. If your chest moves more than your stomach, you are speaking from tension. Confidence begins lower in the body. The lower your breath, the steadier your tone. Pace, speed kills influence. Rushed speech signals one thing: I need you to accept this quickly. That is pressure. Pressure triggers resistance. Slow speech signals: I am not afraid of your judgment. That creates psychological space. High-status communicators slow down key words. They stretch important phrases slightly. They allow silence after statements. Speed makes you forgettable. Pacing makes you intentional. The power of the downward inflection, one subtle but powerful adjustment. End statements with a downward tone, not upward. Upward tone equals uncertainty. Downward tone equals finality. Compare these: we should move forward versus we should move forward. One asks permission, the other establishes direction. Confidence is often just tone discipline, verbal precision. Say less, mean more. Insecure speakers over-explain. They add unnecessary fillers. Basically, kind of, I just think, maybe you know. These weaken the structure of your message. Remove them. Clarity increases authority. Instead of, I just kind of feel like maybe we could try, say, let's try this. Precision is power. When you speak in shorter, cleaner sentences, people listen more carefully, because there is no confusion to filter through. Silence as a tool. Silence is not absence, it is emphasis. After making a strong statement, pause. Let it settle. Do not rush to defend it. Do not fill the air with explanation. Silence forces attention, and attention is influence. The person who can speak less often controls more. The discipline of volume control. Never compete for volume. If someone raises their voice, lower yours slightly. This forces them to adjust. Volume battles create chaos. Controlled volume creates contrast, and contrast creates authority. Calm speech in emotional moments is one of the most powerful signals of dominance without aggression. Command without aggression. True authority does not shout. It does not rush. It does not beg. It delivers statements clearly, at a controlled pace, with emotional steadiness. When your tone, pace, and precision align, you stop sounding like someone hoping to be heard. You sound like someone worth hearing, and that changes how every conversation unfolds. Chapter 3. Conversational framing. How to steer dialogue without forcing it. Most people think control in conversation means domination, talking more, interrupting, overpowering. That is not control. That is insecurity disguised as force. Real conversational control is invisible. It happens through framing, and framing determines how every word is interpreted. What is a frame? A frame is the psychological lens through which a conversation is viewed. It answers the silent question, what is happening here? Is this a debate, a negotiation, a collaboration, a test, a power struggle, a casual exchange? Whoever defines the frame controls the emotional structure of the interaction. And most people don't even realize framing is happening. The first rule of framing: never accept a weak frame. If someone frames you as defensive, emotional, inexperienced, or lower status, and you respond inside that frame, you lose automatically. Example, you seem nervous. Weak response, I am not nervous. You just accepted their frame. Stronger response, what makes you say that? Now the burden shifts. You didn't defend. You redirected. Authority begins when you stop reacting and start repositioning. Frame through assumptions. One of the most subtle ways to steer conversation is through calm assumptions. Instead of asking, would you like to collaborate? Say, when we collaborate, here is how we'll structure it. You are not forcing, you are assuming alignment. The brain naturally resists confrontation but adapts to confident assumptions. Assumption-based framing reduces friction while maintaining control. Labeling the silent steering tool. When emotions rise, label them calmly. It sounds like you are concerned about timing. You seem frustrated with the direction. This does two things. 1, it lowers emotional intensity. 2, it positions you as the observer, not the reactor. The observer holds power. When you label emotions instead of absorbing them, you control the psychological tempo of the conversation. Ask questions that narrow the path. Questions can be tools of control. Open-ended questions expand chaos. Directed questions narrow focus. Instead of, what do you think? Try, what's the most important factor here? Instead of, why are you upset? Try, what specifically caused that reaction? Precision questions steer dialogue toward clarity. Clarity gives you leverage. The reframe technique. When someone introduces negativity or limitation, do not argue. Reframe. If someone says, this won't work, don't respond with, yes it will. Say, what part do you think needs adjustment? You just shifted from rejection to problem solving. Same topic, new frame. Now you lead. Emotional frame control. Every conversation has an emotional climate. Calm, tense, playful, competitive. Your emotional stability sets the baseline. If you remain steady while others fluctuate, they subconsciously sink to you. Emotional control equals conversational gravity, and gravity pulls things inward. The power of redirecting. When conversations drift into unproductive territory, redirect gently. That's interesting. Let's focus on the core issue, or I hear that. The real question is, redirection keeps momentum aligned with your objective, without confrontation, without tension, just subtle course correction. Avoid explaining your frame. Never say, "Let me explain why I am right." Never say, "You are misunderstanding me." These statements signal defensive positioning. Instead, state your view calmly and move forward. Confidence does not argue for existence. It operates as if it belongs. The calm anchor strategy. In high-pressure dialogue, slow your pace, lower your tone, shorten your sentences. This anchors the interaction. People mirror the strongest emotional signal in the room. If that signal is you steer the direction without force. Conversation is navigation. Think of conversation like steering a ship. If you jerk the wheel violently, you create instability, but small, consistent adjustments change the destination entirely. Framing is subtle navigation, and the best navigators rarely look like they are steering at all. Chapter 4. Psychological Positioning. How people decide your value in seconds. Before a single sentence is finished, a judgment has already been made, not about what you said, about who you are perceived to be. Human beings are constantly positioning one another psychologically. This happens silently, automatically, and far faster than conscious thought. The mind is always asking one question beneath awareness. Where does this person sit relative to me? Above, equal, below. This is not arrogance. It is instinct, and conversation is one of the primary arenas where this positioning is decided. Most people believe value is assigned through credentials, intelligence, or experience. Those matter later. In the first moments, value is assigned through signals. Signals of calm or urgency, signals of certainty or need, signals of comfort or tension. You can say the right thing and still lose positioning if your internal state contradicts your words. Psychological positioning is not about dominance. It is about stability. The mind respects what feels grounded. It questions what feels reactive. When you enter a conversation, you bring a psychological posture with you. That posture announces whether you are centered within yourself or seeking validation from the outside. People who seek validation leak energy. People who are centered contain it. Containment is read as value. This is why some individuals can enter a room quietly and still command attention. They are not scanning for approval. They are not adjusting themselves to fit the room. They are internally settled. That internal settlement creates gravity. Gravity pulls attention without effort. The opposite also happens. When someone enters a conversation already trying to impress, explain, justify, or prove, they unconsciously lower their position. The mind of the listener senses the imbalance. The interaction subtly shifts into evaluation mode. Once evaluation begins, authority weakens. This is the trap most people fall into. They believe value is created by performance. But performance communicates dependence on outcome. Dependence erodes positioning. True positioning comes from non-neediness, not emotional coldness, not arrogance, but self-sufficiency. When you do not need the conversation to go well to remain internally steady, your presence becomes stronger. People feel this. They may not articulate it, but they respond to it. Psychological positioning is also shaped by how you handle uncertainty. When you are unsure and try to hide it, tension appears. When you are unsure and remain calm, credibility increases. Calm uncertainty feels honest. Anxious certainty feels false. This is why overconfidence often backfires. The mind trusts composure more than bravado. Another critical factor is how you handle pressure. Pressure reveals hierarchy instantly. When challenged, interrupted, questioned, or disagreed with, your response signals your internal rank. Do you rush to defend? Do you raise your voice? Do you explain excessively? Do you withdraw? Each of these reactions moves your position downward. But when you remain slow, grounded, and measured, pressure reverses. The challenger begins to adjust. Because the human nervous system recalibrates around the most regulated presence in the room, regulation is authority. This is why emotional control matters more than clever responses. A calm pause after a challenge communicates far more power than the perfect comeback ever could. It signals that you are not threatened, and what is not threatened is often perceived as higher value. Psychological positioning is also affected by what you don't respond to. Not every comment deserves engagement. Not every provocation deserves acknowledgement. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. Selective engagement is a signal of status. People of high psychological position do not chase clarity. They allow others to adjust. This does not mean ignoring people. It means choosing responses deliberately, rather than reflexively. The moment you feel compelled to correct perception urgently, you reveal dependence on approval. Seeking collapses positioning. Positioning also stabilizes when you are comfortable, letting silence exist after your words. Silence following a statement signals certainty. Silence following a question signals expectation. Both create psychological pressure without force. The mind fills silence by recalibrating itself around the speaker. This is subtle but powerful. Ultimately, people decide your value not by how much you contribute, but by how settled you are while contributing. If you are grounded, people lean in. If you are reactive, people lean back. Conversation becomes the mirror. This chapter exists to make one thing clear. You do not need to dominate conversations to be valued. You need to stabilize them. Stability reshapes hierarchy quietly. When you become the calm reference point, your words gain weight without effort. Your presence speaks before you do. And once psychological positioning is set, conversation stops feeling like competition. It becomes influence. Chapter 5. The Power of Silence. Why saying less gives you more control. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forces in human interaction. Most people experience silence as danger, as awkwardness, as loss of momentum, so they rush to fill it. They speak to relieve tension. They explain to remove uncertainty. They joke to soften discomfort. And in doing so, they give away control. Silence does not weaken conversation. It reveals who controls it. The person who cannot tolerate silence is negotiating for approval. The person who can remain silent comfortably is setting the pace. This distinction is not subtle to the human nervous system. It is immediately felt. Human beings are wired to respond to absence. When sound stops, attention sharpens. When words pause, meaning deepens. Silence creates a vacuum, and the mind rushes to fill it. Whoever resists that urge holds power. Silence works because it shifts responsibility. When you speak continuously, you carry the burden of direction. When you pause, the other person must respond. This reversal changes dynamics instantly. Most people underestimate how often they speak to manage their own anxiety rather than to add value. They talk because silence exposes their inner state. It reveals uncertainty, doubt, or the fear of being judged. Silence strips away performance, and performance is where insecurity hides. High-level communicators do not fear silence because they are not performing. They are present. Presence does not need constant expression. This is why the most respected individuals often speak less, not more. They allow space between their words. They let statements land. They resist the impulse to decorate every idea with justification. Their silence communicates confidence. There are different kinds of silence, and each serves a purpose. There is silence after a statement. This signals certainty. It says, "I've said what needed to be said." No defense, no padding, no retreat. There is silence after a question. This signals expectation. It creates pressure without aggression. The other person feels invited and obligated to respond thoughtfully. There is silence during emotional moments. This signals regulation. Instead of reacting, you absorb the moment calmly. This often causes others to slow down and self-correct. Silence also disrupts manipulation. People who attempt to dominate conversations rely on reaction. They provoke to gain control. When you refuse to react verbally, their strategy collapses. They are forced to reveal more, explain themselves, or escalate, all of which expose their position. Silence is not passive. It is strategic restraint. Another reason silence is powerful is that it allows you to listen fully. Most people listen to respond, not to understand. Their mind is busy preparing the next sentence, the next defense, the next impression. When you allow silence internally, you actually hear what is being said. This gives you informational advantage. You catch inconsistencies. You sense emotional undercurrents. You recognize motives before they are spoken. Information is leverage. Those who speak too much reveal their position. Those who listen more collect data. Silence also increases the perceived weight of your words. If you speak frequently, your words blend into noise. If you speak selectively, your words stand out. Scarcity increases value. This principle applies to communication as much as it does to economics. When you speak less, people listen harder. Silence also trains others how to treat you. If you rush to fill every gap, people learn that you will carry conversations for them. If you allow pauses, people learn to engage thoughtfully. You set the standard. This does not mean withdrawing or being cold. It means speaking with intention. Every word has a purpose. Every pause has meaning. The hardest silence to master is the one after disagreement. When challenged, the impulse is to respond immediately, to correct, defend, or assert dominance. But the most powerful response is often a pause. That pause does three things. It prevents emotional leakage. It forces the other person to sit with their own words. It communicates that you are not threatened. Often people will soften or clarify on their own when met with silence. They will retreat slightly. They will explain. They will recalibrate. Silence makes room for this self-correction. Mastering silence requires discipline because it feels counterintuitive. It feels like doing nothing, but internally, silence is active. It is control in its purest form. You are choosing not to speak. Choice is authority. When silence becomes comfortable, conversation shifts. You stop chasing engagement. You stop managing impressions. You stop reacting to every stimulus. You become grounded. And grounded presence is felt immediately. This chapter exists to remove the fear around silence. Silence is not awkward unless you make it so. Silence is not weakness unless you treat it as such. Silence is not emptiness. It is space. And whoever controls the space controls the interaction. Chapter 6. Handling pressure without losing control. Pressure is where most people reveal who they really are. Not when things are calm, not when conversations are friendly, but when they are challenged, questioned, interrupted, or subtly tested. Pressure compresses behavior. It strips away rehearsed confidence and exposes instinct. This is why pressure is feared, and why it is also the greatest opportunity for control. In conversation, pressure does not always arrive loudly. It often enters quietly, through a raised eyebrow, a skeptical tone, a dismissive comment, or a sudden interruption. These moments feel small, but internally, they trigger something ancient. The body reacts before the mind can intervene. Heart rate increases, breath shortens, muscles tighten, thoughts accelerate. This is not weakness, it is biology. The nervous system interprets social pressure as threat because historically, rejection meant danger. Modern conversations still activate this old wiring. Most people try to handle pressure cognitively. They search for better arguments, sharper comebacks, stronger words. That approach fails. Pressure is not solved with words. It is solved with regulation. The person who remains regulated under pressure immediately gains psychological advantage, not because they dominate, but because they do not collapse. Collapse is visible. It appears as rushing, as over-explaining, as defensive humor, as sudden aggression, as withdrawal. These reactions are attempts to escape discomfort. Control begins when you stop trying to escape it. The first skill under pressure is slowing down deliberately. When challenged, do not match speed. Do not respond at the same pace the pressure arrives. Speed is the enemy of authority. Slow responses signal internal stability. When you slow down, something subtle happens. The other person begins to feel exposed. Their momentum stalls. The dynamic shifts. This is not manipulation. It is nervous system leadership. Humans unconsciously align with the calmest presence in the room. Under pressure, that alignment becomes even stronger. This is why calm people feel powerful. The second skill is decoupling emotion from response. Pressure tries to fuse the two. Someone challenges you, and emotion demands expression immediately. Anger wants to speak. Fear wants to explain. Ego wants to win. Do not let emotion drive the response. Let it exist without acting on it. You can feel pressure and still respond neutrally. You can feel irritation and still speak calmly. You can feel uncertainty and still pause confidently. This separation is mastery. Most people believe confidence means not feeling pressure. That is false. Confidence means feeling pressure and not letting it control behavior. The third skill is non-reactive acknowledgement. When pressured, you do not need to resist or comply. You can simply acknowledge. I hear that. That's one way to look at it. I understand your concern. These statements do not concede position. They absorb pressure without deflecting it back. Pressure needs resistance or submission to survive. Acknowledgement starves it. The fourth skill is choosing when not to respond. Not every challenge deserves an answer. Not every remark requires correction. Silence under pressure often communicates more than words. Silence says, "I am not threatened. I don't need to prove anything. I am in control of myself." People who are comfortable with silence during pressure are extremely difficult to destabilize, and people sense that. Pressure also tests boundaries. Some individuals apply pressure intentionally to see what they can get away with. They interrupt, they dismiss, they speak over, they probe. Your response teaches them how to treat you. If you allow pressure to rush you, they will repeat it. If you remain steady, they will adjust. Adjustment is inevitable. This is not about dominance. It is about setting a psychological limit. Limits are not announced. They are demonstrated. The calm continuation of your thought after an interruption. The steady pause before answering a provocative question. The refusal to match emotional escalation. These behaviors teach boundaries without confrontation. Handling pressure also requires accepting one uncomfortable truth. You cannot control how others behave. You can only control how you respond. Trying to manage others' emotions is exhausting and ineffective. Managing your own state is efficient and powerful. When pressure no longer destabilizes you, conversation stops feeling dangerous. It becomes navigable. You stop bracing. You stop anticipating attacks. You stop rehearsing defenses. You become present. Presence under pressure is rare, and rarity commands respect. This chapter exists to reframe pressure. Pressure is not an enemy. It is a test of regulation. Those who pass it quietly rise in psychological position. Those who fail it loudly lose ground without realizing why. When you learn to hold pressure without leaking control, something profound changes. People hesitate before testing you. They soften their tone. They listen more carefully. Not because you intimidate them, but because you are unmovable. And unmovable presence is one of the strongest forms of influence there is. Next, we move deeper into an often misunderstood area. Chapter 7. Reading the room without overthinking. Most people misunderstand what it means to read the room. They think it requires constant analysis. They believe it means tracking every reaction, every facial shift, every change in tone. They assume awareness demands vigilance. It does not. Overthinking destroys perception. The moment you try too hard to read people, you stop seeing them clearly. Your attention turns inward. You begin monitoring yourself instead of observing others. You interpret rather than notice. True social intelligence is not hyper-awareness. It is relaxed awareness. The room speaks constantly, but only to those who are quiet enough internally to hear it. When you enter a social space, the most important information arrives immediately. The emotional temperature, the pace, the hierarchy, the level of openness or tension. This information is available in seconds. You don't need to search for it. You need to stop interfering with it. Overthinking creates noise. Noise blocks signal. People who struggle socially often do so, not because they lack insight, but because they overwhelm their perception with interpretation. They try to decode meaning instead of noticing patterns. Patterns are obvious. Interpretations are subjective. The room tells you what it is ready for. Fast or slow, light or serious, open or guarded, structured or fluid. Your task is not to force alignment. Your task is to match the baseline first. Matching is not mirroring, it is calibration. If the room is calm and you arrive energetic, you feel out of place. If the room is focused and you arrive casual, you feel dismissed. Misalignment creates friction. Alignment creates ease. The most socially intelligent people enter quietly at first. Not physically quiet, psychologically quiet. They listen more than they speak. They feel the rhythm before contributing to it. This is not passivity. It is preparation. Once you are aligned with the room's baseline, you can gently shift it. But if you try to shift before alignment, you meet resistance. This is where most people fail. They speak to express themselves, not to engage the environment. They deliver energy that doesn't fit, then feel rejected when it doesn't land. Rejection in those moments is not personal. It is environmental mismatch. Reading the room also requires noticing who others defer to. Every group has informal centers of gravity, not always the loudest, often the calmest. Sometimes the one others glance at before speaking. These signals are subtle but consistent. Power is rarely announced, it is observed. When you recognize these dynamics, you can speak in ways that respect them without submitting to them. You don't challenge hierarchy directly. You don't compete for dominance. You simply speak from stability. Stability is universally respected. Another mistake people make is confusing attentiveness with performance. They nod excessively. They overreact. They signal understanding too aggressively. This reads as neediness. True attentiveness is quiet. It is steady eye contact, minimal affirmation, measured responses. People feel seen when you are present, not when you are performative. Reading the room also involves noticing what is not being said, silence around certain topics, quick changes in subject, tension masked by humor. These absences are information. You don't need to point them out. You don't need to fix them. You simply adjust. Social intelligence is not about control. It is about sensitivity without fragility. Fragility reacts. Sensitivity adapts. The reason overthinking kills social flow is that it pulls you out of the moment. You start living in anticipation, worrying about how you'll be perceived, what you'll say next, or how things might go wrong. The moment you do this, your responses lose authenticity. They become rehearsed. People sense this immediately. Authenticity is not about being raw or unfiltered. It is about being present. Presence sharpens perception. Perception guides action. No analysis required. If you want to read the room effectively, simplify your focus. Feel the pace. Notice who speaks comfortably. Observe where attention naturally goes. Listen without preparing replies. That is enough. When you trust your perception, you stop forcing connection. You stop trying to impress. You stop compensating. And when you stop trying, people relax around you. Relaxation creates openness. Openness allows influence. This chapter exists to free you from the myth that social intelligence is mental gymnastics. It is not. It is embodied awareness. And embodied awareness only appears when you stop overthinking and start listening. Not just with your ears, but with your entire presence. Chapter 8. Handling disrespect without losing authority. Disrespect rarely arrives loudly. It slips in through tone, through interruption, through dismissal masked as humor, through subtle undermining. Most people miss it or overreact to it. Both responses cost authority. Handling disrespect is not about asserting dominance. It is about maintaining position. And position is lost the moment emotion takes the lead. Disrespect triggers the ego. The ego wants immediate correction. It wants to defend identity, reclaim status, restore balance. That impulse is understandable. It is also dangerous. The moment you react emotionally, you confirm that the disrespect landed. You reveal that your position is fragile enough to be shaken. Authority does not come from forcing respect. It comes from being unmoved by attempts to diminish you. This does not mean tolerating poor treatment. It means responding in ways that preserve your psychological ground. The first principle is simple. Do not rush. Disrespect creates urgency. It pressures you to respond quickly, sharply, decisively. Speed feels like strength, but it often exposes insecurity. When someone disrespects you subtly, slowing down is the most powerful move you can make. Pause. Let the comment sit. Allow the silence to stretch slightly longer than comfortable. Silence after disrespect does something important. It removes the reward. The person does not get an immediate reaction, laughter, anger, or explanation. They are left alone with their behavior. This often creates discomfort, not for you, but for them. The second principle is measured acknowledgement, not confrontation, not submission. Acknowledgement without emotional charge. Statements like, "That's an interesting way to put it. Let's keep this productive. We don't need to go there." These responses do not escalate. They do not defend. They reassert boundaries calmly. Boundaries stated without emotion are respected more than boundaries defended emotionally. The third principle is maintaining your pace. Disrespect often tries to speed you up, to knock you off rhythm, to make you fumble or react. Do not change your cadence. Continue speaking at the same pace, same tone, same posture. This continuity signals internal control. People test others to see if they can be destabilized. When you remain unchanged, the test fails. Another key element is understanding why disrespect happens. It is rarely about you. Disrespect is often an attempt to elevate oneself, gain control, or mask insecurity. It is a bid for attention, dominance, or emotional leverage. Once you see it as a tactic rather than a personal attack, it loses power. You stop personalizing, you stop internalizing, and when you stop internalizing, you stop leaking authority. There are moments when disrespect needs to be addressed directly, but even then, authority lies in how it is addressed. Direct does not mean aggressive, clear does not mean loud. A calm statement delivered once is enough. For example, "Let's keep this respectful. That tone isn't necessary. I am here for a constructive conversation," said calmly. These statements carry weight. Said emotionally, they invite resistance. The difference is subtle, and everything depends on it. One of the most powerful responses to repeated subtle disrespect is continuation. You acknowledge briefly, then continue your point as if the disruption failed. This teaches others that derailment does not work on you. People respect those they cannot easily pull off course. Authority grows from consistency. It is also important to recognize when disengagement is the strongest move. Not every interaction is worth preserving. Walking away calmly from disrespect sends a message far stronger than confrontation ever could. It communicates self-respect without spectacle. The ability to disengage without resentment is a high-status signal. Low-status behavior clings. High-status behavior chooses. This chapter exists to remove the fear around disrespect. Disrespect does not diminish you unless you let it dictate your response. Your authority is not granted by others. It is maintained through regulation. When you respond calmly, slowly, and deliberately, something shifts. The person who disrespected you often adjusts. Others in the room take notice. The dynamic stabilizes around you, because in social interactions, the one who remains centered when pressure arrives becomes the reference point, and the reference point holds power. Chapter 9. Asking questions that shift power without intimidation. Most people think power in conversation comes from statements. They try to sound decisive. They try to be impressive. They try to dominate airtime. But the most influential people ask better questions, not more questions, not aggressive questions. Precise questions. Questions quietly decide direction. They determine who explains. They determine who reveals information. They determine who adjusts, and the person who determines those things is rarely the one speaking the most. Questions work because they reverse effort. When you make statements, you carry the burden of proof. When you ask questions, the other person does. Effort shifts away from you and onto them. This is not manipulation. It is conversational leverage. Most people ask questions incorrectly. They ask to be liked. They ask to keep the conversation going. They ask to avoid silence. These questions are soft and unfocused. They give control away. Powerful questions do the opposite. They narrow, they clarify, they expose structure. The first rule of powerful questioning is intentional silence. Ask a question, then stop. Do not explain why you asked. Do not soften it. Do not rescue the other person from discomfort. Let the question stand alone. Silence after a question creates pressure. Pressure produces honesty. When you rush to fill the gap, you relieve that pressure and lose the advantage. The second rule is directional framing. Weak questions are open-ended without purpose. What do you think? How do you feel? These invite chaos. Strong questions guide without force. What matters most to you here? What would success look like in this situation? What's the main concern you are trying to address? These questions narrow attention. They pull the conversation into a defined lane. You are not controlling the person. You are controlling the structure. Structure creates authority. The third rule is calm curiosity. Tone matters more than wording. A question asked with tension sounds like interrogation. A question asked with calm sounds like leadership. Leadership questions do not accuse. They explore. When you sound genuinely interested, not eager, not skeptical, people open up. They explain more clearly. They reveal motivations. They expose assumptions. Information emerges naturally, and information is power. There is a specific category of questions that shifts power immediately. Clarifying questions. When someone makes a vague claim, instead of challenging it, ask them to clarify. What do you mean by that? Can you be more specific? How does that work in practice? These questions do not oppose. They require precision. Precision exposes weak reasoning without confrontation. People either sharpen their position or realize it wasn't solid to begin with. Either outcome benefits you. Another powerful category is priority questions. They force hierarchy. What's more important, speed or accuracy here? Which outcome matters most? If you had to choose one, what would it be? Priority questions reduce noise. They transform scattered discussion into decision-making. Decision-making is associated with authority. There are also reflective questions. These mirror what the other person has said, but slightly reframed. So you are saying the issue isn't the idea, it's the timing. It sounds like you are more concerned about risk than cost. These questions demonstrate understanding, while subtly steering interpretation. People feel heard. You control the narrative. This combination is rare and powerful. One of the most effective uses of questions is under pressure. When challenged directly, instead of defending, ask, "What makes you think that? What outcome are you hoping for? What would you suggest instead?" Defense creates opposition. Questions create exploration. Exploration lowers emotional temperature. And when emotions lower, control returns to the calmest person in the room. It's important to understand what powerful questions are not. They are not traps. They are not sarcasm. They are not rhetorical weapons. Those backfire. They reveal insecurity and provoke resistance. True conversational power is subtle. It feels collaborative, even when it shifts influence. When you master questions, conversations stop feeling like battles. They become navigations. You guide without pushing. You influence without forcing. You lead without announcing leadership. People often leave conversations like this, feeling respected and influenced, without knowing exactly how it happened. That is mastery. This chapter exists to correct a misunderstanding. You don't gain power by speaking louder or more confidently. You gain it by asking the questions that shape thought. The person who decides what is discussed and how it is discussed holds the highest position. Questions decide both. Chapter 10. Ending conversations with authority and leaving a lasting impression. Our conversation ends matters more than how it begins. Beginnings create interest. Endings create memory. Most people obsess over openings. What to say, how to start, how to appear confident. Very few pay attention to how they exit an interaction. And yet, the final moments of a conversation are where perception solidifies. People don't remember everything you said. They remember how they felt after you left. This is where authority is either reinforced or quietly undone. Ending a conversation poorly can erase minutes or hours of strong presence. Ending it well can elevate even an average interaction into something memorable. The problem is that most people end conversations reactively. They trail off. They wait for permission. They linger too long. They over-explain their exit. These behaviors signal uncertainty, and uncertainty at the end reframes everything that came before. Authority is not only about how you speak, it's about how you close. Conversations naturally seek resolution. When that resolution is unclear, people feel unfinished. That unfinished feeling often translates into discomfort, even if they can't explain why. High-level communicators understand this instinctively. They provide psychological closure. Closure does not mean finality. It means clarity. Clarity about what was decided, what was understood, what happens next, or simply that the interaction has reached a natural endpoint. When you provide clarity, you reduce ambiguity. When you reduce ambiguity, you increase trust. Trust is influence that lasts beyond the conversation. One of the most common mistakes people make is overstaying. They continue talking after the main point has landed. They add unnecessary details. They dilute impact. This happens because silence at the end feels risky. People worry that leaving too soon might appear rude, cold, or dismissive. So they stay and weaken their position. But authority is often expressed through restraint. Knowing when to stop is a sign of control. The strongest communicators end conversations slightly earlier than expected, not abruptly, but cleanly. This leaves a sense of completion rather than exhaustion. People leave thinking, "That was solid," not, "That dragged on." Another mistake is seeking validation at the exit. Phrases like, "Does that make sense? Is that okay? I hope that helps. Let me know what you think." These seem polite, but they subtly hand control back to the other person. They reframe the entire interaction as provisional. Instead of confirming authority, they reopen evaluation. High authority exits do not ask for approval. They state, summarize, and close. A powerful way to end conversations is through intentional summarization. Not a recap of everything, just the core. Something like, so the key point is this. That's the direction we're taking. That's what matters most here. This does three things. First, it anchors meaning. Second, it demonstrates clarity. Third, it positions you as the one who understands the conversation as a whole. Understanding the whole is leadership. People trust those who can synthesize. There is also the concept of forward framing. You don't just end the conversation, you subtly point forward. That forward direction might be a next step, a future conversation, a broader context, or simply an implication. Examples: we'll build from that. That sets the foundation. We can revisit this when the timing is right. You are not committing, you are orienting. Orientation creates continuity. Continuity keeps your influence alive after you are gone. One of the most powerful exit tools is calm finality. Calm finality means ending without rushing and without hesitation. No apology, no justification, no filler, just a clean close. Your tone remains steady, your posture unchanged, your pace controlled. The body language says, I am complete. People mirror this internally. They accept the end without resistance. It's important to understand that authority at the end is not about dominance. It's about self-containment. You are not dependent on the conversation continuing. You are not dependent on the reaction. You are not dependent on approval. That independence is felt, and it elevates everything you said before it. Ending conversations well also protects you. It prevents energy drain. It prevents unnecessary exposure. It prevents you from talking yourself out of a strong position. Many people lose authority because they keep speaking after they should have stopped. Silence after a strong close is not awkward. It is confirmation. There is a deeper psychological layer here. Humans naturally seek completion. When you provide it, you become associated with relief and clarity. When you don't, you become associated with confusion or fatigue. People gravitate toward clarity. They want to engage again with those who leave them feeling settled, not scattered. This is why some people are remembered fondly, even if they weren't loud or charismatic. They knew how to end. Ending with authority does not mean cutting people off or disappearing abruptly. It means respecting the arc of the interaction. Every conversation has a rise, a peak, and a fall. Most people either never reach the peak or refuse to descend. Mastery lies in recognizing the peak and stepping away cleanly. This chapter exists to remind you of something subtle but critical. Influence is cumulative. Every conversation either adds to it or subtracts from it. How you leave determines which direction it moves. When you end conversations with clarity, restraint, and calm certainty, you leave behind a psychological impression that lingers. People remember you as composed, grounded, intentional. They trust your words more next time. They listen sooner. They adjust faster. And over time, without force, without noise, without performance, you become someone whose presence naturally carries weight. Chapter 11. Becoming the Calm Center, the long-term identity of conversational mastery. At some point, technique must give way to identity. If conversational mastery remains something you do, it will always require effort. Effort creates tension. Tension leaks, and what leaks eventually collapses under pressure. True mastery begins when control is no longer a strategy, but a state you return to naturally. This chapter is not about what to say, it is about who you become, because over time people stop responding to your techniques and start responding to your baseline presence. That baseline determines everything. Most people live conversationally reactive lives. They react to tone, they react to energy, they react to pressure, they react to approval or disapproval. Their internal state shifts constantly based on external input. This makes them unpredictable, not to others but to themselves. Unpredictability weakens authority. Authority grows when people know what to expect from you emotionally, not your words. Your stability, when you become the calm center, others orient around you automatically. Conversations slow. Emotional volatility decreases. Respect rises without explanation. This is not charisma. This is regulation. The calm center is not passive. It is alert, observant, and responsive, but not reactive. The difference matters. Reactive people move because something happens. Centered people move after something happens. That pause changes everything. It creates choice. Choice is the foundation of power. To become the calm center, you must first stop outsourcing your emotional regulation to other people. If someone's tone can rush you, you are not in control. If disagreement destabilizes you, you are not grounded. If silence makes you anxious, you are not settled. This is not criticism, it is awareness. Most people were never taught to self-regulate socially. They learned to adapt, perform, appease, or dominate, but not to stabilize. Stabilization is learned, and it begins with a simple internal rule. Nothing external moves me faster than I choose. This does not mean emotional suppression. It means emotional leadership. You feel what arises, but you decide how it manifests. The calm center is also built through consistency. If you are calm only when things go well, that is not control. If you are calm only with certain people, that is not mastery. Mastery shows up when the environment is unpredictable, and you are not. Consistency under variation builds trust. People trust those who remain steady across situations. They know what emotional energy they will receive. They feel safe engaging. Safety increases openness. Openness increases influence. This is why emotionally grounded individuals often become informal leaders without trying. Leadership emerges around stability. Another defining trait of the calm center is non-attachment to outcome. When you are attached to being liked, winning, convincing, or appearing competent, tension enters the conversation. That tension is felt even if your words are polished. When you release attachment, presence returns. This does not mean indifference, it means internal independence. You participate fully without hinging your identity on response. That internal independence creates space, and space is magnetic. Over time, something interesting happens. You stop preparing for conversations. You stop rehearsing responses. You stop managing impressions. Not because you don't care, but because you trust yourself. Trust in self is the quietest and strongest form of confidence. It cannot be faked. It develops through repetition, awareness, and restraint. The calm center also changes how you listen. You stop listening to reply. You stop listening to defend. You stop listening to perform empathy. You listen to understand structure. What is really being said? What is being avoided? What is driving the emotion underneath the words? This deeper listening allows you to respond accurately, not quickly. Accuracy creates respect. People feel understood, not analyzed. It's important to understand that becoming the calm center does not make you emotionless. You still experience joy, irritation, interest, frustration. The difference is that emotion no longer dictates behavior. Behavior follows intention. This alignment between emotion, intention, and action creates coherence. Coherence is authority. When your words, tone, and presence align, people stop questioning you. They feel the alignment before they evaluate content. This is why some people are trusted even when they say very little. There is also a long-term effect to this identity shift. As you become more centered, others change around you. People who rely on chaos feel uncomfortable. People who seek reaction lose interest. People who value clarity lean in. Your social environment reorganizes. This is not isolation, it is filtration. You attract interactions that match your level of regulation, and those interactions tend to be higher quality. The calm center does not dominate rooms, it stabilizes them. And stabilization is a rare skill. Most people unconsciously create turbulence. They escalate emotion. They amplify tension. They spread urgency. When you become the opposite, you become valuable. Organizations value this. Groups depend on this. Individuals gravitate toward this, because calmness under pressure is not common. This chapter exists to mark the transition. Up until now, you have been learning skills. Now, you begin forming an identity that does not need to prove itself, an identity that does not rush, an identity that does not react, an identity that speaks when necessary and remains silent when silence is stronger. That identity becomes your default. And when it does, conversation stops feeling like something you manage. It becomes something you inhabit. Chapter 12. Speaking with confidence is not an act. It is a state. Most people spend their lives trying to sound confident. They rehearse phrases, they copy delivery styles, they memorize techniques, and yet, under pressure, everything collapses. Because confidence was never meant to be performed. It was meant to be inhabited. This final chapter exists to dissolve a dangerous illusion, the idea that confidence lives in words. It does not. Words are only the surface expression of something deeper. Confidence lives in state, and state is not something you turn on when a conversation begins. It is something you cultivate long before you speak. When confidence is treated as an act, conversation becomes exhausting. You monitor yourself constantly. You think about how you sound, how you look, how you're being received. Your attention splits between the interaction and your internal commentary. Split attention weakens presence. Presence weakens influence. This is why many intelligent people struggle socially. Not because they lack ability, but because they are mentally divided. True conversational confidence requires integration. Your thoughts, emotions, body, and voice must move in the same direction. When they do, you don't try to be confident, you simply are. Confidence as a state begins with self-trust. Self-trust is not believing you'll say the perfect thing. It's trusting that you can handle whatever happens, calmly. If you trust yourself to remain grounded, you stop fearing mistakes. If you stop fearing mistakes, your body relaxes. When your body relaxes, your voice steadies. When your voice steadies, people respond differently. Everything flows from self-trust. This is why confidence cannot be hacked permanently with techniques alone. Techniques without trust create fragility. The moment something unexpected happens, the structure collapses. State-based confidence adapts. Another pillar of confidence as a state is internal permission. Many people subconsciously believe they need permission to speak clearly, pause confidently, or hold silence. They feel they must earn authority through performance. This belief is false. You do not need permission to slow down. You do not need permission to speak deliberately. You do not need permission to end conversations cleanly. Authority begins when you stop waiting to be granted space and simply occupy it calmly, not forcefully, not arrogantly, calmly. Confidence as a state also requires acceptance of discomfort. There will always be moments of uncertainty, moments of silence, moments where you don't know what to say immediately. These moments do not threaten confidence. Resisting them does. When you accept discomfort without rushing to escape it, something powerful happens. Your nervous system learns that nothing bad follows. Over time, discomfort loses its grip. This is how confidence becomes durable. It is no longer dependent on perfect conditions. One of the deepest shifts you will experience is this. You stop needing conversations to go a certain way. You no longer need approval to feel settled. You no longer need dominance to feel strong. You no longer need control to feel safe. This internal independence is what others experience as confidence, not bravado, not charisma, grounded independence. People respond to it instinctively. Confidence as a state also reshapes your relationship with silence. Silence stops feeling like a gap to be filled. It becomes a space you are comfortable inhabiting. When silence no longer threatens you, conversation slows naturally, and when conversation slows, depth appears. Depth builds respect. Respect builds influence. Over time, this state becomes your baseline. You no longer turn on conversational confidence. You carry it. It shows up in how you enter rooms, how you listen, how you respond, how you pause, how you leave. It is consistent. Consistency is credibility. There is a quiet confidence that does not announce itself. It does not impress immediately. It does not demand attention, but it lingers. People think of it later. They recall how calm you were, how steady your voice sounded, how grounded your presence felt. That memory influences future interactions. Confidence compounds. This audiobook was not designed to make you louder. It was designed to make you steadier, because the world does not need more noise. It responds to clarity. It follows composure. It respects those who can remain centered when others rush, react, and destabilize. If there is one principle to carry forward, it is this: confidence is not something you show people. It is something people feel when they are around you, and when they feel it, they respond accordingly. Conversation stops being something you manage. It becomes something you move through with ease, intention, and quiet authority. Chapter 13. Becoming the calmest person in the room. Calm is not the absence of emotion, it is the presence of command. In every room, there is an emotional center of gravity. Conversations, moods, and decisions bend toward it. Most people assume that center belongs to the loudest voice, the most confident posture, or the person with the highest status on paper. They are wrong. The true center belongs to the person who is least disturbed by what is happening. Calm is not passive, it is not soft, it is not withdrawal. Calm is the result of internal alignment. When your nervous system, attention, and intention move together without friction. When that alignment is present, others feel it before they understand it. The calmest person in the room does not rush to speak. They do not compete for airtime. They do not escalate when tension rises. They do not need to win moments to feel secure. They observe first, respond second, and move last. This sequence alone changes everything. Most people live in reverse order. They react first, justify second, and reflect later. By the time reflection arrives, the damage is done. Authority has already leaked through tone, speed, or emotional excess. Calm reverses that leak. When you are calm, your breathing slows without effort. Your posture settles. Your voice lowers naturally. Your words become fewer but heavier. The room adjusts around you because human beings unconsciously synchronize with stability. Chaos looks for order. Noise looks for stillness. This is why calm leadership works even without formal authority. People trust regulation more than certainty. They follow steadiness more than confidence. Confidence can be performative. Calm cannot. Becoming the calmest person in the room requires one essential shift. You stop trying to control outcomes and start controlling your state. Outcomes are external. State is internal. External control is fragile. Internal control compounds. When you prioritize state, you stop needing conversations to go a certain way. Agreement becomes optional. Approval becomes irrelevant. Winning becomes unnecessary. What matters is coherence, that your inner state and outer behavior remain aligned regardless of pressure. That alignment is what people feel as presence. The calmest person in the room also understands timing. They do not speak to fill space. They speak when clarity is needed. They wait when silence is stronger. They end discussions when momentum peaks, not when it fades. Timing turns restraint into authority. Calm also sharpens perception. When you are not emotionally hijacked, you notice subtleties others miss: shifts in tone, changes in energy, hidden resistance, unspoken agreement. Calm creates bandwidth. Bandwidth creates insight. Insight allows precision, and precision is power without noise. This is why calm people rarely argue. Arguments require emotional investment. Calm individuals do not need to prove. They state, they ask, they pause, they move on. If resistance remains, they let it reveal itself. Time exposes what force cannot. Over time, something remarkable happens. People stop testing you. Interruptions decrease. Provocations soften. Conversations slow when you enter. This is not because you demanded respect, but because your presence reorganized the emotional environment. You became the reference point. Becoming the calmest person in the room is not about suppressing emotion. It is about not letting emotion drive behavior. You still feel. You still care. You simply choose when and how those feelings are expressed. Choice is the final signal of mastery. When calm becomes your default, conversation stops being a performance. You are no longer managing impressions or defending position. You are simply present, deliberate, and grounded. Influence becomes effortless because it is no longer forced. Calm does not announce itself, it is recognized. And once recognized, it changes how everything flows around you. Conclusion: confidence is not loud, control is not aggressive, influence is not force. Throughout this audiobook, you've learned that conversational mastery is not about tricks or clever lines. It is about state, timing, restraint, and emotional regulation. It is about becoming someone whose presence stabilizes rather than agitates, clarifies rather than overwhelms, and leads without insisting. When you master your internal state, your words follow naturally. When your words follow naturally, people listen. When people listen, influence emerges on its own. This is not a skill you turn on, it is an identity you return to. You have been listening to Audiobook Mantra. If this audiobook sharpened your awareness of communication, presence, and control, explore the collection further and subscribe for more life-transforming audiobooks. These works are designed to be revisited, not rushed, to be absorbed slowly and applied over time. Calm is trained, control is practiced, mastery is lived. When you're ready, return. The room will already feel different.